Half measures are not enough anymore. I demand from our partners, on behalf of the victims of Bucha and the people of Ukraine, to take the most severe sanctions against Russia this week. This is not the request of Ukraine's foreign minister. This is the plea of the victims of rape, torture, and killings, their relatives, and the entire Ukrainian nation.
That was Ukraine's foreign minister demanding action from global leaders as the UN Security Council prepares to meet. The horrific nature of those mass killings are just one part of the story. We learned this morning from the UN Migration Agency that 11 million people are believed to have been displaced since Russia's invasion. That's 1/4 of the country's entire population. So what more is the international community prepared to do about all this? Joining us now, Hagar Chemali, former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the United Nations, also worked at the NSC and the Treasury Department, and we just found out we crisscross in many ways over our careers.
Thanks so much for being with us. Why don't we talk? We were talking about Madeleine Albright before we came on the air, and losing her recently. What a great voice she would be right now, especially for a day like today, where the United Nations, let's face it, the United Nations is facing a serious challenge today. May look completely irrelevant. It takes me back to what Madeleine said when she was UN, America's ambassador to the United Nations. She said the UN must reform or die. It looks like we are at that point again.
Yes, you know what's crazy is that we've been talking about reforming the UN for over 20 years, and there's been really no movement. Every Secretary General has said we're going to be reforming. Every U.S. ambassador to the UN has said we need to lead on reform, and it hasn't happened. And now you have a situation that is showing the UN as at an existential crisis, that shows that you've got this body that you absolutely need, but is feckless at this point, is unable to achieve its mission in upholding international peace and security.
Yeah.
So we were talking also in the break about this moment for the UN, and if not now, when? If they don't step up to do something. The dilemma, of course, is the council that can do something is the UN Security Council, on which Russia has a permanent seat and can veto any action. So what do you do with that dynamic? By the way, that's the group that President Zelensky is going to address in just a few minutes.
Right. The Security Council is the only body that has any ability to wield any kind of action, so whether it be sanctions or a peacekeeping mission or anything. And if you have a body that is hamstrung by these veto-wielding powers, in particular Russia, then it is going to be completely impotent. The only organization at the UN or body that can do anything to affect change at this point is the UN General Assembly, and not in terms of its resolutions. Its resolutions just show how many countries are condemning Russia, for example. Right. But they are the body that can actually reform the Security Council. And so I would hope that in this situation that you have now, that you've got a number of ambassadors and the Secretary General, who just started his second term, to come out and say, this highlights the crisis we're facing. We need this body more than ever. So we're going to need to take some real action to change the body, to change its makeup and change the veto.
What could that real action be? Because I think one thing this war is really proving is it's showing how different agreements and different bodies, whether or not they actually have something that they can actually do to impact change. NATO's being challenged, and now here in terms of accountability, what actions can be taken? Actual ones.
If you're talking about action now in the immediate term, the only opportunity that exists is for the International Criminal Court at The Hague to continue its investigations, which it is. And the UN has also named a number of human rights focused experts to investigate the atrocities in Ukraine, to document all of them. One of the things we used to say when I worked at the U.S. mission to the UN was that these thugs do eventually face their day in court. And you do see that time and again. It takes a long time, but you've seen Charles Taylor of Liberia, Omar Bashir of Sudan, Slobodan Milosevic of Serbia. They eventually face their day in court. It takes a long time because on one hand you have the effort to build the evidence and the indictments, but you also have to have that the host government needs to turn the guy over. Eventually it happens, though.
We always we hear talk from time to time of kicking Russia off of the Security Council. That'll never happen, right?
No, it can't, because the way that would happen is that the Security Council itself needs to recommend to the UN General Assembly to kick a member out of the UN for not upholding its values. And so the Security Council will never
It'll
do
never
that.
do it. Yeah.
Right. So what about the question that former Ambassador James Jeffrey suggested? He said, obviously, you're never going to get a peacekeeping zone or a safe zone in Ukraine if you go through the Security Council, but he suggested that perhaps you do it going through the General Assembly and set it up in a certain way there. Is that a possibility?
No, because the peacekeeping missions are done under what's called Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, and it's only the Security Council that has the ability to do that. And peacekeeping missions in general, they don't work unless there's an actual peace to keep. And that's a lesson we learned, actually, from the war in the Balkans. To highlight and underscore why it would have been so amazing to have someone like former Secretary Madeleine Albright right now is because she dealt with a situation where you had genocide, you had atrocities, you had a government that was committing that was tied with Russia. Russia was blocking any efforts at the Security Council to do anything. And after a few years, she said that was it. And she worked with NATO to pursue the bombing campaign that happened in Kosovo that helped bring the end to that war. So, I wish we could use her wisdom right now, but one of the things that kind of lingers with me is that she told President Clinton weeks before her death that we needed to defend Ukraine. And I don't know what she meant by that, but I think we need to heed that.
Yeah, she knew. Former spokesperson for the U.S. mission to the United Nations, Hagar Chemali. Thank you very much. Come back. We really appreciate it. And this just in, NBC News.
Hey, thanks so much for watching our YouTube channel. You can follow up on today's top stories and breaking news, or catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.